going into Pakistan at that time, so that was the same trip you went from the UK to Pakistan and then from Pakistan to Afghanistan. Is that right? Or did you go to Pakistan and return to the UK?
I flew into Islamabad. I think it was a Friday. I worked for a Sunday newspaper, so my deadline was the next day. Pakistan was about 5 hours ahead, so any advantages I gained, I still had to file a story by about 7 o'clock at the latest that night. And so I was really under pressure to write something and get a story. And by this time, there were about 3,000 journalists from all sorts of news agencies around the world who were also looking for stories in Pakistan. So it was quite a tough arena. But I didn't speak the language. And I just knew from past experience that if you don't have a fixer to hand straight away, then the best thing to do is to find a taxi driver, because they know everything. And so I went through about 3 or 4 taxi drivers, and then I hit on this one called Pasha. And I told him, I'm a journalist, I need this, I need that. And he was a great source of knowledge. He had a great news sense as well. And like all taxi drivers, he had great connections. And if he didn't know something, he would know somebody who did. And I remember, so we sort of got through the first Sunday by the seat of my pants. And then the next week, we knew that the war was going to happen, but we knew it was going to take about 2 or 3 weeks before it happened. So I said to him, I would like to speak to General Hamid Gul, the former head of the ISI in Pakistan. And I have to say, if I asked to speak to the head of the ISI today, I probably would have been ordered out of the car. But Pasha said, he said, that could be quite difficult. He said although he's retired, he lives in Rawalpindi. And he said, leave it with me. I didn't think anything would happen. And then later that afternoon, he came to see me and he said, my wife's sister's brother's cleaner lives next door to a woman who cleans for the neighbor of General Gul. And there was such a long train of people involved in this. And I just thought, well, this is never going to happen. And I said, well, if you can get him, great. The next morning, he came to the hotel and he said, we're off to Rawalpindi. I said, what for? He said, we're going to see General Gul. And I went, how did you manage that? He said, I told you, my wife's sisters, brothers, and the whole string. And this is how we got to the former head of the ISI. And we got some tremendous interviews over the next couple of weeks. We went to the madrasa where Osama bin Laden was like a chancellor there.
Where was this? Sorry, which city was this?
The head of the madrasa was Sami al-Haq.
Madrasa Banoria, I think it may
Yes.
be.
And so we were all over interviewing some incredible people, and this taxi driver just turned out to be the greatest source of knowledge. And some American journalists tried to steal him from me.
Secret.
But when they got in his car, he didn't have air conditioning. And they said, "Where's the aircon?" And he said, "I don't have it." And they said, "Well, we can't travel in this." And so I got him back.
So how did it go with General Hamid Gul? What were your thoughts about the meetings with General Gul?
Well, he explained to me the culture of why you can't just hand over a guest. And because the Taliban were saying, Osama bin Laden, whether we like it or not, is our guest, and we can't just hand him over. So he was explaining to me the Pashtun culture, especially. And he was talking rather. He was very supportive of the Taliban. He liked them. He said that they were an honourable people. And again, he explained the whole concept of Pashtun culture, and he's trying to educate this Westerner who had no idea. And so it was a really good interview to get. And I do believe, because I was captured a few days later, I do believe he was able to contact them and say, she came to me as a journalist, and
I was going to ask.
I think
so General
that he
Hamid
spoke
Gul
up
is a
for me.
legendary personality. He's passed away. May Allah forgive him. I'm sure people in Pakistan would love to know a bit more about. So when you were speaking with General Hamid Gul, I can imagine he was presenting to you the picture as it is from the point of view of himself, the Taliban, Pakistan. But a lot of that was completely contrary to what the beliefs that the West held. And General Hamid Gul himself, if I remember correctly, was banned from entering UK and other Western countries because of his former involvement in setting up the Taliban movement. Not setting it up, but kind of supporting him as ISI. So coming from the Western culture, knowing what you knew at the time, when you were speaking with him, like, was it making sense what he was saying, or were you thinking, this is ridiculous? What is he on about?
No, he made a lot of sense. He was no great admirer of the Americans, but he was very pragmatic, and he knew that if Pakistan was to navigate its way through the geopolitical situation, then it had to acknowledge the Americans and their point of view. But it was clear that he didn't respect the Americans. He seemed to hold some affection for the Afghans, for the Taliban, and for the Pashtun culture. And he gave me an insight into the dilemma facing General Musharraf, who was due to make a statement on television in a couple of days, because George Bush was putting pressure on everybody.
With us or against us?
He said, you're either with us or you're with terrorists. And he wanted each leader around the world to give their allegiance to America or make their position quite clear. And so I asked him what Musharraf would be doing. And he said he's in a very difficult position because people in Pakistan are very suspicious of all things American. They are losing trust in the Americans. They don't believe it's a good nation. They don't believe it has Pakistan's interests at heart. And he said, however, if Musharraf says that he is not going to support George Bush, that will be as good as declaring war on America. And it would cause enormous problems, obviously, for Pakistan. And then he talked about the Indian influence and the Kashmir situation. And, you know, he gave me a masterclass in Asian politics in the couple of hours that I was sitting there. So, you know, I left General Gul a lot wiser and with more knowledge than when I went in. And a couple of days later, of course, Musharraf made that historic television address.
Where he,
Yes. And he had this slow, agonizing build-up, you know, and all people wanted to know, are we with Bush or not? And he and he went agonizingly, step by step, and you could tell this was a man caught between a rock and a hard place. And it was fascinating, having had that talk with General Gul, to watch Musharraf agonizingly make this address to the nation. And I've often thought about that since, because that was pivotal to what happened subsequently in Pakistan and Afghanistan and the rest of the world. And I said to people, you know, I'm not a big fan of Musharraf, but I can't see what he could have done to other than say, I am standing with the Americans. And looking back now, there was only one thing that I think that he could have done. And that was to say, I can't make this decision alone, and so I'm going to the Pakistan people, and so I'm going to hold a referendum. And that would have been the way forward.
If he held a referendum, it would have been, the referendum would have gone against his decision. He would have then had to stand up against America. Yes. And he knew what consequences that would have had then. I'm not saying that would have been the wrong thing, but it would have been taking us into a completely different, very challenging set of, not necessarily the wrong direction, but a very difficult path.
Yeah, it would have delayed the inevitable, but Bush would have gone berserk at that point.
They could have gone into the Afghan operation without Pakistan support, so they would have had to dealt with Pakistan first then. In that situation, maybe, I'm not sure what would have happened.
Absolutely right. You know, Pakistan was pivotal, and you know, America needs Pakistan far more than Pakistan needs America. And Imran Khan realized this.
Actually, Imran Khan and Hamid Gul were quite good friends. I don't know. Did you get to meet Imran Khan back then at that time, or was he not in the picture much?
No, I hadn't spoken to Imran Khan at that time, and I think that PTI, his political party, wasn't up and running then. Right. I might be wrong. But no, there was no reason for me to speak to Imran Khan, although I'm sure
Yeah.
Pasha would have found a way had I asked.